right, guys, so here is our notebook, hopefully all set and ready to go. And if you don't have this done yet, go watch Setting Up Your Notebook video. Okay, so here is our first divider, and the first topic we're going to talk about, main topic we're going to talk about, are just some intro things to geometry, sort of like the basics of geometry. We will want to kind of get those things out of the way so that we can all talk about geometry together in the same way, because it's important to be consistent in math, okay? So on our little divider here, we're going to have our table of contents on this side. And today, the notes we're going to take are about points, lines, and planes. And this is actually going to go from page 1 to 3. And some of this stuff is going to kind of be optional, just so that you know. And I'll let you know which things are and which things aren't. So the very next page here is going to be page 1. So guys, sometimes I'll number a page and sometimes I won't, so just pay attention to that. And if you get your packet of stuff that I gave you at the textbook handout, the very next thing you should see is this crossword puzzle. Now, if you notice, these two are identical. And so you just need to cut that in half. And normally I would have you share with a friend, but you know, social distancing. So really the other one you don't need. You can just use that later as some scrap paper. So I'm going to set that aside. And I'm going to tape this one down. Again, you can use tape or glue. Tape for me because it's faster. Now, this crossword puzzle is not something I'm going to do with you. So we're going to turn the page and add to page 2. So the very next page, right behind the crossword puzzle, we're going to have page 2. And the next sheet that you should have in your handout is this one here. And again, two of the same thing. We don't need both. Now, it's up to you how nicely you want to cut this out. If you want to cut out the table itself, you can do that. I'm just going to cut it right in half again and save that other half as scrap paper. Just because I don't like to be wasteful, even though this is a little wasteful. It's for the benefit of all, though. So we're going to tape that down. Now, the next page that you have in there are these teeny tiny little boxes. Now, these have definitions, pictures, and ways to name different things. Now, I'm going to leave this up to you also, where this is going to be an optional thing. You can either cut each of these little squares out, and again, there are 2, so you're not going to need both, but you can cut out each of these little rectangles and sort them and put them in their correct square here. So like I would find the point, I would put the definition here, the illustration, and then the naming, all for point there. Similarly for line, I would put all those there. Okay, so again, we'll come back to that. We don't really need this one. It's not going in our notebook. We need one last one though. The next one that you should have looks like this. And I'm actually going to flip this over so that I'm looking at this side. And you have the center line, and we are going to fold each short edge to the center line so that we kind of get this cute little book that we can open up these doors. And then if you want to cut along the dashed line to make 6 individual doors so that we can look at each one on its own, that would be fine. If you don't, it's not that big a deal. And then I'm going to tape this one in on page 3. So page 3 is right across from our chart. And I'm going to tape that one. Okay. So this is the one I definitely want to fill out with you, and then we're going to see where we're at after that. The rest of those notes in that notebook, or in that packet that I gave you, rather, we're going to hold on for later. Okay. So these are the building blocks of geometry. We need to understand these different words here. And some of these things are, as weird as it sounds, almost as weird as an unsolved math problem, undefined or hard to define things. But we need these building blocks to kind of make the rest of geometry or the rest of this three-dimensional or two-dimensional space that math wants to live in. Okay, so the very most basic sort of geometric figure that we can have is a point. So what a point is, again, hard to define. It's a dot. It doesn't take up any space. So no space taken up. All it does is it simply marks a location. So the way I always think of it is if I go to Google Maps and I want to figure out where Cops and Robbers is, you're typing in Cops and Robbers and it puts a pin exactly where that is. That's all a point is. It's going to mark a location for you. It's just going to put a dot right exactly where it is. And when we're going to draw it, that's what you want to do too. You want to draw a small little dot. You don't want to make it huge. You don't want to make it like a circle, like an open circle. It wants to be a filled in dot. And we need to label it because Cops and Robbers is in a different location than, let's say, the new candy shop that has the rolled ice cream that's really good. So I need to name my points, and the way that I name them is I put a capital letter near that point. So we always want to use an uppercase letter. So always one uppercase letter. Now, if I'm at a different location, then I might use a dot, but a different letter. So I might have location B or point B. So we can draw it like this. Also, we might write it as point A, like that sometimes. Okay. Now, when I have 2 points, let's say, for instance, Cops and Robbers and the new Flushing candy store that has a really good rolled ice cream, once you have 2 points, you can connect those 2 points with a line. Now, if I think about, well, it kind of works in that situation. I picked a really good example because they are kind of connected by a straight line because it's just Main Street. Now, if it was a different sort of location like Cops and Robbers and Flushing High School, you can draw a straight line between those. There's not a road that exists straight between those, but you can draw a line. So what we get is a line. Now, a line is just 2 points connected. I'm going to put connected in parentheses because a line does not end. And so when we're showing that, we'll have our 2 points, A and B. And then, I want to get a straight line. I need a ruler. We connect them, and as long as we go through them and put arrows on either side, that implies to everyone looking at it, everyone in the know, that these are going on forever, that this does not end. Arrows mean that I do not end. And it's important to understand that the arrows are important. And it's also important to understand that even though I'm only showing 2 points on here, there are lots of other points that I could put on this line. So like I could put a point right here and call it C, or I could put a point over here and call it D. Like there are lots of other points that we could just randomly draw on the line if we wanted. Now the way that we name it, there's kind of 2 ways. We can use 2 of the points that are on the line, but only ever 2. And then we put a little cute line drawing over top of it. So any 2 points on the line is how we can name it. But it has to be 2, no more, no less. Now, another way that we can sometimes name it is you might notice sometimes that we put a cursive L or a cursive letter at the end of a line or near the end of the line. I guess it doesn't end, so that's kind of weird. So you can also call it line L. Or if that was like an M or an S or whatever, line S. So that's another way to name it. Okay, now, if instead of going on forever, I want my line to end, we get what's called a line segment. So a line segment is part of a line. So a part of a line. So 2 points connected that end. So you might hear me talk a lot about endpoints because in a line segment, you have 2 endpoints. So for instance, I might have my points A and B again. And rather than drawing a line through them, I might draw a line segment that begins at one and ends at the other. And so we just draw that line that connects them, no arrows going through them. They stop at their endpoints. Okay, so the way that we name it is we use our 2 letters again, the endpoints this time. And some people will draw it with a little line segment over top. Some people don't. There's a reason why you should and why you shouldn't, but I'm not super particular, so, you do you, whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, so if I have something like that, like I have a line, but I want one end of the line to end and have like an end point, but the other I want to continue off in another direction forever, then I have what's called a ray. So a ray is a line, again, kind of hard to define because it's kind of a line that goes in one direction. Aw, Harry. And has one endpoint. Okay, so I still need 2 points because it's still kind of a line. So maybe I have my points A and points B again. And then it doesn't matter how a ray is drawn. It could have an endpoint at A and continue through B. It might have an endpoint at B and continue through A. Just depends on the ray that we're talking about. I'm going to draw my ray so that it ends at B and goes through A like this. However, the kind of tricky thing about naming it is when you're naming it, I always have to name it with the endpoint letter first. So in this case, I have to name this ray BA because it ends at B and goes through A, because we always want our arrow over top to show that it's a ray going to the right, even if the line kind of goes to the left. So when we're naming it, we always want to start with your endpoint and end at the arrow point. Sometimes I use PT to abbreviate point. I hope that's okay. So your arrow always needs to point right, which leads me to opposite rays. So when I say that I have opposite rays, I'm talking about 2 rays that go in opposite directions. And so if you think about it, if I have 2 rays going in opposite direction, if I join them together, I should have a full line. So that's kind of interesting. So definition, again, kind of hard to define, but opposite rays are rays. So you have to understand what a ray is, but they are rays that share an endpoint and form a line because they'll go in complete opposite directions. So in this case, I kind of need 3 points. So I might still have my line AB, but then somewhere on line AB, I have another point. So maybe right here I have point C. To talk about the opposite rays that I have here, I have to start at an end point. So if I kind of ignore this part of the line, I have a ray pointing in this direction. And if I ignore this part of the line, I have the other ray pointing in the opposite direction. So my opposite rays here would be CB. So starting at C, going towards B. And starting at C, but this time going towards A. So opposite right. Arrow is always pointing to the right. End point is always first, and then arrow point is always second. And then last but not least, so all of these kind of go up a level, right? I started with the most basic, a point. When I have 2 points, then I can connect them and get a line. And that's a little bit more interesting, a little less basic. Now, when I have 3 points, sometimes I can get these opposite rays. But if that third point wasn't on the line, then what I get is called a plane. So the last thing we have is a plane. So kind of the definition of a plane is when I have 3 points not on a line connected. And then this kind of, the plane part of it is all of the flat space in between. So the plane is the flat space in between. And sometimes I always feel like it's easier with a picture. So if I have my points A and B, I can definitely draw a line, but the moment I add a third point, if I don't put it on the line, if I put it somewhere else that won't be on the same line as AB, then what happens is I can kind of connect the dots. Now I'm not going to just make line segments here, I'm going to make lines. But when I connect all the dots, we get this space in the middle, all this space in here. And that is a plane. Now, I will say, normally, when we're looking at pictures of planes in geometry, you'll often see them represented as like a little quadrilateral like this, and then they'll put a bunch of stuff on it. And you'll see some pictures probably, well, you probably did see some pictures already, and then you'll probably see some later. But it's really sometimes hard to see this three-dimensional stuff, but that's usually what our planes look like. But they can look like this too, because all it takes is 3 points to make a plane. And because it takes 3 points to do it, when I name it, I have to use 3 points that are on the plane. So I always have to use the word plane. And then the 3 points that are on it that I can see here are A, B, and C. Now, there could be more points on here. In fact, there are thousands, millions, and infinite number of points that I could put in here. So I could name it with another 3 points if I wanted. Like if there was a point D in here, I could call it ACD. ACD. That's good too. But it always has to be 3 points. So you always have to use the word plane. And then it's always 3 uppercase letters or 3 points. Now, I will say, sometimes when we have these cute little parallelogram guys that look like this, you might notice that they put an uppercase cursive letter in there. That's my really crappy uppercase cursive L. And if you've noticed that, then you can also call it plain L if it's cursive. So it has to be an uppercase cursive letter to use just one, which I know is like super annoying, but that's just the way it is. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. What I would like you guys to do after watching this video is either do this chart, and when you do the chart, you can either just copy the answers from here and write them in, or if you want to cut out each little square, you can glue them in. It's up to you. Or you can do the crossword, whichever one you think is going to be a little bit more your style, and then attach the picture just so I know that you did it and you learned some stuff about points, lines, and planes, and hopefully this wasn't so bad. All right, first set of notes done.